The blast shook the desk I was hiding behind and filled the air with smoke. It was the doorway. They had blown away the first bottleneck, sending bits of plaster and wood flying through the air. That was bad news. There was a silver lining, though. They clearly had explosives, but they hadn't used them on me. Maybe they wanted to take us alive after all. It could explain their lousy shooting. I wasn't enough of an optimist to think I didn't have to worry about getting shot. I didn't doubt for a second that these guys would be happy to shoot me somewhere just to slow me down. Tough guys in movies could carry on heroically with a bullet in the shoulder, but I wasn't so sure that I could. Even if I tried, how long could I really keep stunning bad guys if I was bleeding from a bullet wound? For action heroes, blood loss doesn't seem to have much effect until it's dramatically appropriate. I couldn't depend on things working out that way in real life. As interesting as these questions were, I had other things to worry about, namely the dozens of armed men moving through their newly made hole in the wall directly towards me. I began firing frantically, but there were simply too many of them. They filled into the outer room, crowding like guests at some military cocktail party. I fired through the door, but they were hard to hit. They knew how to avoid me, and they were staying out of sight. That meant they were preparing to blow the second doorway, which, when that happened, I was going to face more soldiers than I could possibly handle. Once they got through the second door, they'd shoot me, or at least get past me, and they'd be able to stop Tamret. And everything we'd done, everything she'd sacrificed, would be for nothing. Fortunately, I had one shot at dealing with the whole bunch of bad guys in a relatively enclosed space. I laid down some suppressive fire to keep them occupied. Then, I took Volonic stun grenade out of my pocket, armed it, and threw it into the outer room. If they knew what a phatic stun grenade looked like, they'd know how to disarm it. They'd have about a second to get the job done, and if the augmented person was in the room with them, it would be an easy task. I'd be out of luck. On the other hand, if the augmented person was in there, why hadn't he just stormed in and disarmed me? He was either holding back for some reason, or was really clueless about his abilities. I hated to take a bet on the second option, but it was either that or be overwhelmed. I threw myself on the floor behind the desk and closed my eyes. An instant later, I saw a bright flash through my eyelids and felt the shockwave of the grenade pass through me. That was all very positive, I thought. I peered up over the side of the desk, pistol out, but I saw no movement in the other room. "How long?" I asked Tamret.
10 minutes, she said.
10 minutes?
Yes, she snapped. I haven't forgotten. I'm almost there.
"I think we're good on my end," I said. Then I saw the figure emerge through the hole in the outer wall. She was the augment, and her name was Nora Price. She looked at me and smiled, looking like a CEO in her expensive gray skirt suit. Also, her eyes were glowing red. That pretty much was never a good sign. "Hey, Tamret," I shouted.
"Kind of busy."
"I know, and I hate to bug you, but can you check real quick to see what it means if your eyes are glowing red?" There was a brief pause.
"Death ray eyes," she said.
"Death ray eyes? That's a thing?"
"Yeah."
There was a brief pause as her fingers clattered over the keys.
"Seems kind of unfair, doesn't it?"
"I am thinking that, yeah."
"Hello, Zeke,"
Nora Price said, walking slowly into the room. She didn't bother to hide or take cover. Why should she? She knew a PPB pistol couldn't hurt her. "Wow," I said. "I get a visit from the Viceroy. I must be important."
"Oh, you are,"
she said, her lips twisted into a cruel sneer.
"You are the most wanted criminal in the entire Phatic Empire. I'm going to look very good when I hand you over."
"Oh, don't be so hard on yourself," I said. "You've always had a decent sense of style." She pointed her death ray eyes towards my hiding place, which suddenly felt completely inadequate.
"You're funny. Funny until the end."
"I'm also funny in the after-credits sequence," I said. "Impatient people miss out on that."
"I heard your girlfriend say she needs about 10 minutes to finish what she's doing,"
Nora Price said.
"My attack saucers will be here in less than 6. I've already won."
"Which is why you're not bothering to attack me, and why, after I've taken care of your dozens of goons, you're now just going to be speechifying in my general direction?"
"That is correct,"
she said.
"I don't need to get my hands dirty. I know your pet Rorrel could challenge me if she chose, but She will make every effort, no matter how pointless, to complete whatever sabotage she is attempting. So you see, this is how civilized people use their abilities, to avoid violence rather than create it.
I have to tell you, you're really inspiring me to expand on my horizons right now.
You really never change, do you?
There aren't a lot of opportunities to put on fresh clothes during intergalactic emergencies, I said.
So witty,
she responded.
Especially as you face devastating emotional loss. I also know about the rural girl's unfortunate roll of the die. You didn't shut down the surveillance cameras. Very sloppy. So I'm aware she'd rather go out doing something heroic than waste her short time in a pointless fight with me.
Yeah, well, there's still time, I said. I sprung up from behind my desk and fired a dozen bursts at her. They all hit, and they all did nothing.
Did you expect that to harm me?
I was hoping I might get lucky, I said, trying to sound disappointed. I needed her to think I had hoped exactly that. I had one chance. I really didn't want to blow it. Mrs. Price had described what Tamrat was doing as some kind of sabotage. That meant she had no idea what we were actually up to. If she did know, she would have captured our 2 other teams by now, which she clearly hadn't. She wouldn't be able to keep herself from gloating if she had them in custody. Our plan was alive, and I needed to make sure we stayed that way. I fired a few more bursts at Mrs. Price.
Really, Zeke, what's the point?
It's very therapeutic, I told her. I fired a few more times. It relieves the stress. You should try it. Okay, maybe you shouldn't, since you have death ray eyes. I sighed, and raised my hand with the pistol, letting it dangle from my fingers so she could see I wasn't about to shoot. I let it fall down to the desk, then, very slowly, I raised my hands into the air and began to stand up. I would not have been entirely surprised if she'd hit me with her death ray eyes, but she probably wanted to hand me over alive. This seemed like a fairly safe gamble. She squinted her glowing red eyes at me and tried to figure out what I was doing.
What is this?
It's the intergalactic gesture for I surrender. The raised hands are supposed to let you know I am now unarmed and cannot hurt you. I think there might be a pamphlet around here somewhere to explain it. There are pictures and everything.
I don't believe you're surrendering.
I'm unarmed, and my hands are in the air, I said. I'm pretty sure I'm doing this right. She continued to consider the situation. So, now what? I asked.
Now what? Now you wait until my attack vehicles arrive and you're stunned. These are your last moments of freedom, Zeke. I suggest you enjoy them.
But they don't have to be, right? I mean, you're Viceroy and everything. You could cancel those attack vehicles if you wanted to, couldn't you? She smirked at me, like this was exactly what she was expecting.
Why would I want to do that?
I took a step towards her, moving slowly, non-threateningly. I slumped my shoulders to signal my defeat, but I also lowered my hands a little. Come on, Mrs. Price, I know you like power and telling everyone what to do, but this is your home planet. Do you really want Earth to be part of the Phatic Empire?
You're so naive, Zeke. Since the fads have come, we've seen a virtual end of war, crime, and cruelty. I understand why you personally don't welcome the change, but that's just selfishness. You like the Confederation, and the Confederation lost, so now you're sulking. You must see the truth as it is. Under Phatic rule, humanity will know peace, comfort, and security. But you want to stand in the way of all that. You're the villain here, Zeke, not me.
That's interesting, I said, taking another step closer to her. But the Confederation is offering the same thing, without the enforced re-education and military oppression. Maybe you can explain how that's not better?
The Confederation is a temporary blip in galactic history. It can't last. Look how easily Junip was able to take control of their government. A single being able to undermine their entire political system. The citizens of the Confederation are sheep, Zeke, and sheep always get eaten in the end.
Or they get shored. Or is it sheared?
I'm not sure I see your point.
She was clearly losing patience with me. Sheep, I explained, scrunching my forehead up in concentration. Think about it. Someone comes along and cuts off their wool, and that wool gets turned into a sweater. Maybe a nice striped one. Or a turtleneck.
Zeke, what are you going on about?
Come on, I said. It's not that complicated. When it's cold, people can put on those sweaters and they can sit by a fire and roast marshmallows.
Are you trying to distract me with nonsense?
Mrs. Price asked.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Marshmallows, I told her. That's what I'm talking about. My eyes went wide as I worked myself up to a frenzy. I'm talking about marshmallows, I shouted. As battle cries of liberation go, this was admittedly kind of ridiculous. But my point had been to get closer to her and put her off her guard. What, after all, did a super-augmented meanie like Nora Price have to fear from an unarmed, idealistic troublemaker shouting about marshmallows? She probably thought the answer was gibberish, but she didn't know that I was concealing an upgrade neutralizing injector in my hand. So now that I was close enough, I jabbed it into her arm. Nora Price looked at it, then looked at me. Her eyes were no longer glowing red. I'm talking about marshmallows, I said again, this time my voice low and menacing. I hadn't meant for this to be my cool line, but it was out there, and I was going to run with it. Having said it, I took out one of my spare PPP pistols and stunned her. The instant she hit the floor, I heard an electronic whir coming through the broken windows. I turned to see 2 saucers at least a mile distant, but closing fast. How much time? I asked Tamrat. Maybe a minute. I was still pulling a lot of battle tactics from Star Trek II, so I had asked Tamrat to double any time estimates while enemies were lurking. When Mrs. Price had said she had attack ships 6 minutes out, I knew we were cutting things close, but there hadn't been much of a choice. Now, things were desperate. We had a narrow window to get things done. I keyed my bracelet to talk to both teams. Take care of opposition, I shouted, and do it fast. Things are going to be tight. Both teams acknowledged, and I watched helplessly as Tamrat's fingers danced over the keyboard. The saucers were moving in. I had no idea how close they had to be in order to stun us, but once they realized Tamrat wasn't affected, they would very likely use more aggressive methods to stop her. Maybe they wouldn't be able to hurt her, but they could keep her from completing her task. We're good in Beijing, I heard Steve announce. All set in London, Mi-san said a few seconds later. Finally, Tamrat looked up. Done, she said. She had overridden the security blockades and broadcast the message we'd prepared. Now it was up to the others to kill the power feed. Go! I shouted. Now! 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 It took less than a minute. The bright beam of energy jutting out from the Empire State Building in Manhattan suddenly switched off. The 2 saucers on the horizon must have known this meant that things had become critical because they suddenly sped up. They were moving in on us, and I had no illusion that they planned to stun us. They were going to take the building out. Insulate, I shouted into my bracelets. Insulated, Mi-san said. Insulated, Steve said. I nodded at Tamrat. Our EMP insulation fields were up. She hit a few more keys and deployed the massive electromagnetic pulse. Except for the system within our personal insulation fields, every single electronic system on the planet just went dead. The saucers that had been preparing to fire on us fell from the sky, spiraling into the river. We'd done it. I looked over at Tamrat, who was smiling at me. That smile reminded me of the price she'd had to pay to complete the mission. We'd done what we had set out to do, but the price had been too high. Then we heard an alarm sound. Tamrat's console had been insulated from the EMP so she could send the record of what we'd done into the larger galaxy. Now, however, it was a light. A message flashed across her holographic screen. Electromagnetic pulse detected. Emergency retaliatory measures initiated. Tamrat's eyes went distant. I knew she was trying to pull up data that could explain the message. Then, her look turned from blank to alarm. They have a protocol for this kind of attack. In the event of an EMP assault that knocks out planetary control, they have a biological response that's designed to target the source of the pulse. What does that mean? I demanded. What's a biological response, like a deadly virus or something? Not that. The word I'm getting, it doesn't process through the universal translator. It doesn't exist in any Earth language but one called Japanese. What's the word? I had a feeling I really didn't want to know. Kaiju, she said. I sat down heavily in an office chair. I looked out the window and saw a sudden upheaval in the river. Then it began to emerge, massive and reptilian, and heading directly towards our building. Thousands of gallons of dirty river water rolled off its glistening green body, and it swiveled its massive head, looking for its first target. Then it stopped, and its huge yellow eyes seemed to find mine. It opened its mouth, showing rows and rows of pointed teeth, each as long as a telephone pole. The fads were sending Godzilla after us.